Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, today is a very happy day for me because my Boston Celtics completed the sweep of the team I despise the most, not just in the NBA, but professionally. I cannot stand the Brooklyn Nets. That's been well established. And if I were to have to pick any team to sweep in any sport, I would have been the Nets, and the Celtics. It seemed like they did this one for me, Sap. I'm going to say they really went out of their way to please me because I was so disappointed with them at the first half of the season. And so thank you, Boston Celtics, for making this series quick and fun. And so I'm on cloud nine. So the Celtics now are the first team to move on into the second round and the only team to complete a sweep in the first round, which is pretty rare. Usually we get a couple. But this was such an unexpected sweep. That's what's, sort of really throwing off a lot of people, is that the Nets were actually the favorites in this series betting wise, Sap. So I guess what happened is the question.
Well, yeah, this was probably the least likely series to end in a sweep. You would think that, Phoenix would be able to beat New Orleans in a sweep, but then Devin Booker gets hurt, so that changes things. You would think that Milwaukee would sweep Chicago, but then Chris Middleton gets hurt, and now it looks like Milwaukee will win that series in 5 games. But the Celtics-Nets series was supposed to be the best first-round series, and they were really good games. The Celtics won 4 games by a total of 18 points. But really, Jet, from the fourth quarter of game 2 on, I always felt the Celtics were in complete control of this series. It seemed like every time Brooklyn would get close in game 3 or game 4, what would happen? The Celtics would get a stop, and then the Celtics would go down and get a bucket. And again, we saw Brooklyn's defense, which is porous, just never came up with a big stop when it needed to, whether it was Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Al Horford, whoever was hitting big shots whenever Brooklyn got close. Look, the Celtics are a much better defensive team than Brooklyn. And again, you see with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, 2 tremendous players, without question. But those 2 guys hooked up in 2019 to go to Brooklyn. From the start of the 2019 season, the Brooklyn Nets played 247 games, including the playoffs. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant only played 58 games together. That's about 23% of their games. They lacked chemistry. As great as they are, they lack some chemistry there. And also the teammates that they play with lack chemistry with those star players. So the Celtics, meanwhile, you got Brown and Tatum in their 5th year together, and Smart's been here 8 years, and Horford was here for several years before coming back. And, Pritchard and Grant Williams, good role players that were drafted by the Celtics. You had a constructed team beating a team with 2 superstars and then a bunch of role players who just weren't ready for prime time. And thus you ended up with a sweep, a fairly close sweep because of the 18-point margin that the Celtics won the 4 games by, an average of 4.5 per game. But again, from the end of game 2 on, I felt the Celtics were in pretty good control of the series.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the constructed team, because I think that makes a lot of sense, Sap, especially if you look at the teams that are having success right now in the Eastern Conference. Miami's up 3 games to 1. They're obviously a very well-constructed team, carefully constructed team, as they typically are, because Pat Riley knows what he's doing there. The Bucks are up 3 games to 1. They won the title last year. We know they're a well-constructed team. And then a team like the Sixers, who aren't super well-constructed, they have no bench. They got James Harden midway through the season. They are maybe struggling more than people expected them to. It's 3-2 in that series. We know Doc Rivers has a hard time putting series away. And so, I think there's something to that, Sap, of, okay, we're going to have chemistry. We're going to be well constructed. We're going to know what we're doing here. And I think that really starts to matter a lot in the postseason.
I think the best way to do it is draft well, but then add superstars. Do both of those things. And that's when you end up with a really good title contending team. That's kind of what Miami's done, right? You draft well with Tyler Hero and with Bam, but then you go out and sign free agents like Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. So you put them all together. And again, it's a well-constructed team.
And it's not guys, Sep, that you're just saying, oh, look at this shiny guy. It's a guy that will fit into your system. We know Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler are perfect pieces for the way that the Nets play. But like teams like the Knicks who just like look at, oh, we have money to spend. We're going to spend it on this guy. And it doesn't necessarily work. Yes, adding stars is great if you can do it, but you also need to add stars with purpose. You need to make sure that they're going to come in and they'll fit in well. Another example of that is you can do it through the trade market too. Like Milwaukee added Drew Holiday last year. And, that's a big reason they won the title because he fit perfectly on the team.
Right. The Celtics drafted well with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, Grant Williams, and Rob Williams were later first-round picks, and they've done really well. Unfortunately, Danny Ainge wasn't able to hit on Aaron Nesmith and Romeo Langford. If he'd been able to nail those picks, just think about how much deeper this team would be. But and then you bring back Horford after he was here as a free agent. You bring back Tice after he was here for a couple of years, and kind of put it all together. You throw Derek White in, who was really not a big factor in the series against Brooklyn. But overall, that's how you construct the team. Now, the super teams still can win. The Lakers did that 2 years ago, won a championship, right? I mean, you signed LeBron as a free agent, you drafted pretty well and traded a lot of those guys for Anthony Davis, and you win a championship. But back to this series, I just think that the Celtics were better defensively, and you could see that because Brooklyn shot the ball pretty well in this series, 50% from the floor, 42% from three-point land, and that's with Durant only hitting 33% of his three-pointers, but so many turnovers. I mean, Durant had a grand total of 20 turnovers in this series, which is just abnormal for him or any top-notch player. So the possessions favored the Celtics, even though Brooklyn shot the ball pretty well. But it just seemed to me that every time the game got close, the Celtics got a stop and Brooklyn couldn't get a stop. It just was that simple.
Yeah, and last night was a perfect microcosm of that, right? The Nets were able to late get it to 1 point, and another pivotal moment was Kevin Durant with 22 seconds left on the free throw line has a chance to cut it to one again, and misses one of his two free throws. It was his only miss of the night, but it was a massive miss. And so the Celtics, sort of by hook or by crook, were able to keep the Nets at just enough of an arm distance to put this thing away. And it's not easy to close out a series in the NBA, especially against a star player, especially on the opposing team's home court. And the Celtics were able to figure out a way to do that. And it deserves to be noted that they did it the final 2 minutes and 30 seconds with Jason Tatum having fouled out of the game on what was one of the most egregious foul out calls I can remember. Just embarrassing that the NBA fouled out a star player on what was a complete off the ball flop from Goran Dragic to get Tatum out of that game.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, right? Like kind of hold on to the guy, fall down and make it look like he caused the contact. And again, Tatum, the bigger, stronger athlete. It wasn't Scott Foster's call, but he was part of he was a lead official. So, maybe he got the message to the other two that, we got to get Tatum out of this game. So, yeah, you're able to beat Scott Foster and the Brooklyn Nets. And obviously a big reason that the Celtics won that game is Nick Claxton goes 1 for 11 from the free throw line. So as much as Scott Foster and that referee group tried to help the Brooklyn Nets couldn't help themselves. And I kind of felt bad for Claxton because he seemed to be one guy who cared, played his ass off, played good defense, scored inside. I mean, he just did some nice things out there, but 1 for 11 from the free throw line, that ain't good. He shot 58% from the free throw line this year. If he had done that last night, maybe we're going to game 5. But overall, got the thing done, got Rob Williams back for 2 games. I don't think he looked terribly good, but now he's going to have another 4 or 5 days, maybe a week before the next series, and try to get him right because you're going to need him for your next opponent, which in all likelihood will be the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks, led by the best player in the world in Giannis. Again, I'd like to put that out there because we kept hearing about Kevin Durant being the best player in the world. No, Kevin Durant has never been the best player in the world. He's always been the second or third best player in the world, and I think that's where he's at right now. But right now is Giannis's time, and you'll see a difference because Giannis is a more physical player, and he'll take that contact that the Celtics give him, which Durant kind of backed down from. But again, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Milwaukee still has to win that series, but I expect them to.
Right. I think everybody does. They're up 3-1, and now Zach LaVine is going to miss game game 5 with being in the COVID protocol. So it seems even more likely that Milwaukee's going to wrap this thing up in 5 games. The last note, Sap, about Rob Williams, just to your point, I think what the Celtics were doing was it was less about integrating him, into the offense and seeing, okay, can you do the stuff that you were doing in the regular season? It was more about, all right, let's use this as an opportunity to reintroduce you to what it feels like to play at game speed, 5-on-5
Right.
in a competitive environment. And they didn't really care so much what he did, if he was effective or not, just more ramping up his conditioning and making sure that he, felt comfortable. And I think that, the fact that they swept them is massive for the Celtics and Rob Williams, because like you said, Sap, it gives him more time to heal and recover. Plus, he got the experience of playing, 30 minutes in a postseason series where he had to put in max effort. So that's all good. And what I said, Sap, last night on my post game recap of it is the exciting thing for the Celtics is, as well as they played in this Brooklyn series, they can play better. And that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of why I think people are thinking, okay, they have a legitimate shot of looking at the field right now of competing for and winning a championship, because they haven't played their best basketball yet, because Rob Williams hasn't been part of the equation, and he should be going forward, at least more so than he was in the Nets series. And you could still expect the Celtics, to be able to maybe have games where they play a little bit better defensively or where they play a little bit better offensively. So I still think that the Celtics have room to improve, which is, that's what you want and what you would think out of a team that's on a mission to win a championship.
Yeah, they weren't terribly efficient on offense. I mean, Tatum and Brown put points on the board and hit big shots when they had to, but they weren't shooting at a high percentage. But you could expect them to maybe be better in the next series, although it's kind of tough to go there because you didn't shoot that great against a pretty poor defensive team in Brooklyn, and now you're going to face an elite defensive team in Milwaukee. So, you would think the scores would be a little bit lower. The physical play will be more so because Milwaukee's a more physical team than Brooklyn. But yeah, overall, I mean, to sweep the Nets, to get Rob Williams back in some capacity and remain healthy. So now you've got a little bit of time to kind of like exhale, rest, relax, and get ready for your next series. It's a perfect situation for the Celtics.
Right. So if we're going to look ahead, we both agree, and I think, pretty much everybody agrees that it's going to be Milwaukee. The fact that the Celtics were able to sort of pick Brooklyn based off of thinking, okay, we're not afraid of them. And then in the next round, if we get there, we'll have home court against Milwaukee. I think, the Celtics deserve a lot of credit for meeting that challenge, but I think it could end up being a big factor that the Celtics have home court in this series. Assuming, again, Milwaukee is able to not completely blow it and will, take out Chicago. I think that's a big factor too. But as you alluded to, Sap, and I talked about this on my post game last night, it's the Celtics' defensive strategy is going to have to be wildly different. You can't play that super physical game with the Bucks, especially with Giannis, just like you couldn't do it with LeBron because they relish that physical game. That Giannis, bigger and stronger than everybody on the Celtics. He might be the strongest player in the league, honestly. So, you can't, if you're playing that physical game like you played with Kevin Durant on Giannis, that's playing right into the Bucks' hands. So it'll be interesting to see how this, hyped up and statistically elite Celtics defense is having to completely change game plans from one series to the next. But, that's sort of the mark of, are you really a great team? Are you a serious contender? Means, can you adapt and change from one series to the next, from one game to the next? Because that's what the postseason is.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Brooklyn series, the biggest takeaway I had is how much bigger and more physical the Celtics are than Brooklyn. The Celtics are a big physical team. It almost feels like they were constructed by Bill Parcells or Bill Belichick, right? I mean, Williams is a big guy. Al Horford's got girth. Grant Williams is a fire hydrant out there. He's kind of like a PJ Tucker type guy who gets up underneath you and is physical. Tatum is strong. Brown is strong. Marcus Smart's, like a linebacker out there. It's a big physical team. And then you looked at Brooklyn and saw Kevin Durant, who maybe weighs 200 pounds at 6'11". Claxton's not a big guy. Drummond is big, but really can't do much out there. Seth Curry, Patty Mills. I mean, it's not a big team at all. The Celtics much bigger and stronger than Brooklyn, and I think they wore them down a little bit. But now you're going to face a Milwaukee team where, like you said, Giannis is just a force, and Bobby Portis is a physical player, and Brook Lopez is a 7-footer who can protect the rim but also go outside and hit 3-pointers. Not to mention their guards. Drew Holiday's kind of like Marcus Smart, right? I mean, so
similar,
they're going to be.
Yep.
If they're matched up, that's going to feel like a football game out there. So, and then you got Grayson Allen, who's a prick out there, but he's been shooting like 75% from 3-point territory, and he'll be the biggest villain on the Milwaukee Bucks.
And Ibaka, remember they brought him in too.
Another big guy who's got championship DNA. And again, you look at this Milwaukee team, the Celtics can have home court advantage, but Milwaukee was able to win Game 7 in Brooklyn last year in overtime in the second round. And then they won a huge Game 5 in Phoenix to take control of that series in the finals. So they're obviously able to go on the road and win. And the Celtics have played great on the road. I mean, you look at since the middle of January, the Celtics are 37-10. They've been phenomenal on the road with just many games by 20 or more points margin of victory. They're just blowing teams out on the road, and quality teams, whether it be Philadelphia or Miami or whoever, so they're not afraid of the road. So this is going to be a very, very interesting series. I mean, heck, you could look at this series and say whoever wins this may become the favorite to win the whole darn thing, because if it's Milwaukee, they're the defending champs getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and Philly and Miami, I know we'll talk a little bit about them in a bit, in both of their series, they're banged up quite a bit. And then you look out west, and the co-favorite out there is Phoenix with a hobbled Devin Booker, not quite back to action. So things are breaking right for the Celtics, certainly as far as injuries. And this series against Milwaukee, provided Milwaukee wraps this thing up, which we expect they will, this is going to be a completely different series. It's going to be much more physical. And again, Giannis, he just relishes the contact. He grows from that. He's like Superman.
Sure, and I think we'll do a more of an in-depth breakdown when the series gets confirmed. After the Bucks take care of business, whether that be tomorrow or Game 6. I think that they're going to just wrap it up in 5, but we can look more closely at, all right, when are the games? Each the matchups specifically, but overall it should, like you said, be a great series, and a really tough task for the Celtics, because knocking out the defending champions is never easy. And I agree with you. We've been saying this for a year now, Sap, or since last finals, I should say, that Giannis is the best player in the world. And Charles Barkley's been saying it. I agree with him. It's weird that more people aren't saying it. And maybe Kevin Durant. It took Kevin Durant getting swept for more people to say, well, would Giannis have gotten swept in any series? I think to me, he's pretty clearly the best player in the world right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much argument to be made, and yet, like you said, what was it, a couple weeks ago, JJ Redick doesn't even consider him like a top 5 player, which is insane.
Top 3. Yeah, he actually brought it up to, I think it was Embiid in a podcast. He says, well, you, Jokic, and Durant are the 3 best players in the league, and Embiid was like, you're leaving Giannis out? And he said, well, he's not as skilled as you guys. And again, the whole skill thing is wonderful. Kyrie Irving is as skilled as they get. Is anybody putting him in the conversation as one of the 3 or 5 best players in the league? I mean, Giannis is a force. He's a force in a similar fashion. I mean, he's not quite as big as Shaq was, or say Will Chamberlain, but he's got that type of game where he just is a force. I don't know what other way to describe him, where he's not going to be stopped going to the basket. The same way LeBron James has been that way for most of his career. And LeBron's kind of changed a little bit as you get older. You don't want to go to the basket as much and take the abuse. So now you maybe shoot a little bit more from the outside. But Giannis is undeterred and is just, the strongest force in the league right now. And again, compared to those other players that are in that discussion as the best player in the world, he's by far the best defensive player. So let's factor that in as well. That's a big part of what these guys do. So yeah, I kind of went through this a little bit after Barry Bonds retired. Everybody was ready to anoint Alex Rodriguez as the best player in baseball, but it was really Albert Pujols. You just always think that it's someone else's turn. Well, Kevin Durant may go down as the greatest player who was never the greatest player in the league. That type of kind of backward compliment, I guess, like an all-time great, but was never quite the number 1 player. But Giannis is the guy right now. He's got that championship ring to show us, and it was based on him and him carrying a good, not a great team. Whereas Durant won 2 titles when he was there, dropped into the best team in basketball. So there's a different context to that.
And I think with Giannis too, where he deserves a lot of credit is that since he got knocked out in the bubble by the Heat, no one's been able to
Mhm.
figure him out since then. I mean, the wall building hasn't
Right.
worked as well. He's adapted a little bit, has become a better passer. Figured out, how to get to his spots a little bit better. They added more talent. They added Drew Holiday, and that helped a lot. But he's been a nightmare matchup every game for 2 years now, where he gets his numbers no matter what. He might not shoot great from the outside, but he finds a way to get to the paint, and he's the most dominant paint and post scorer since Shaq. Which, I mean, that should tell you how dominant he is. So,
Mhm.
again, we're going to talk about the series more in depth, so I don't want to continue to harp on it, but it's just a completely different type of matchup than what the Celtics just had against Kevin Durant. Both great players, but completely different in terms of strategy.
Yeah, without question. It's could be night and day.
All right, so Sap, let's move on and just again, we'll talk more about that series as it gets confirmed, but let's take a look at the rest of the series as they stand right now. Miami has a chance to put things away tonight against the Hawks. Game 5, they're up, so 3-1. Though the wrinkle in this one is no Jimmy Butler tonight, so Atlanta could stave off elimination. What's been so impressive about Miami, Sap, is that they have completely shut down Trae Young in this series.
Yeah, Trae Young's the key guy. You cut the head of the snake off and the snake will die. That's the approach against Atlanta. And I think with Jimmy Butler out with right knee soreness, you got Kyle Lowry out. I mean, those are your two best players. A lot more will fall on Bam and also Tyler Hero. And maybe Bam's the second best player on the team. They're an ensemble, probably more than any of the elite teams. They really are an ensemble, right? Because you got Butler, Lowry, Bam, Hero. I mean, these four guys are
Yeah,
all outstanding.
They're the 03-04 Pistons. Is that a good
Yeah,
comparison?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and Butler someday could be a Hall of Famer. Lowry, maybe. I mean, everybody makes the basketball Hall of Fame. But yeah, I mean, Ben Wallace did make the Hall of Fame from that Pistons. But yeah, they don't have like a top 10 player. I mean, we can have a discussion if Jimmy Butler's a top 10 player. I think he's probably just on the outside of that because he's not really an elite shooter. He does everything else really well. And he's a competitive guy and plays excellent defense. But yeah, they're really an ensemble of players that understand their role and do it. So, obviously they want to get this thing wrapped up because who the hell knows what's going to happen with Philly and Toronto going forward. And if Miami can get a little extra rest before the next series, get Butler and Lowry a little bit healthier, they'll be that much stronger for that.
Yeah. So I mean, Atlanta, I guess could win tonight because no Butler, and scoring is never the easiest for the Heat. Though they have gone, they've had a couple of high scoring games in this series, but sometimes they do struggle to score the basketball, and without Jimmy Butler, it's certainly possible. But I think the Heat are going to be able to. The Hawks aren't coming back from this, so we expect the Heat to move on. We talked about the
No.
Bulls and the Bucks. Philadelphia, Toronto has become really interesting, Sap, because of the whole Doc Rivers angle and the fact that just Philadelphia doesn't seem right. I mean, they looked so great in the first game, and then since they look pretty good in the second game, and then they just look weird to me. I don't know what to make of them, Sap.
Well, I mean, they're not very deep, right? So if any of their
No, their
top
bench is
players,
terrible. Their bench is
well,
awful.
yeah, I mean, if Embiid has an off night, what the hell are they supposed to do? And now he's playing with a thumb injury that's going to impact him. I mean, it's going to impact his shooting, obviously. And that's a type of injury that it's not going to be right till the offseason because every time you go out there, someone's going to foul you in that area knowing that that's an injury. Harden seems to be aging in dog years. Tyrese Maxey's really good, but Matisse Thybulle can't play in Toronto. And they're just not very deep. And look, I love Doc Rivers. I mean, Doc Rivers was one of my favorite players in the 80s because when I was covering the league, you'd go into the opposing locker room at TD Garden or back then the Boston Garden, and Doc Rivers was one of the best interviews in the league. Win or lose, he was at his locker, would answer all the questions. Love Doc Rivers. Here's a guy who's, as a head coach, blown 3-3-1 leads in the playoffs, 3-3-2 leads in the playoffs. That's 6 series where he had a chance to win. And in those knockout games, he's 0-15. I mean, just
That's
think
really
about
bad.
that. That's as bad as Nick
Really
Claxton at the
bad.
foul line,
Yeah.
right? I mean, really, 3-3-1 series, 3-3-2 series. So in potential series clinching games, he's 0-15 in those 6 series. And now this series is up 3-0. He's 0-2 in that. So now he's 0-17 in that situation. And again, he's kind of the Kyle Shanahan of the NBA. I mean, Shanahan had a huge lead in the Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator, lost, had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl as a head coach, lost, had a 10-point lead in the NFC Championship game in the fourth quarter, lost. So, Doc Rivers and Kyle Shanahan, there's a connection there. And again, I love Doc Rivers, but this team just always feels like it's on the verge of imploding. And then playing in that city, I'm sure talk radio today in Philadelphia is very measured in, understanding of what the Sixers are going through. Sure, they're very, very, calm and measured. I think not. So look, Toronto is like the complete opposite, right? They're such a well-constructed team. It seems like every guy on that team is 6'9" and can do everything on a basketball court. Could they come back and win this? It's never been done at 3-0, but with Doc Rivers involved in a well-coached, versatile Toronto team, now that you're going up to Toronto where Tybalt can't play because he's not vaccinated, I would not be shocked if Toronto wins game 6, forces game 7, and then the pressure would be totally on Philadelphia.
Right. The fact that in game 5, Sap, Philadelphia only was able to muster 88 points at home in a closeout game. Like, what the hell? And this isn't a Raptors team at full strength. Scotty Barnes is out there on kind of duct tape. So I don't know what the hell. Something's wrong with this Philadelphia team. Do they, Sap, you've been around basketball teams for a long time. Are they thinking about this, the Doc Rivers angle? I know Doc must be thinking about it, but is the team thinking about it?
Well, I mean, last year they were up 3-2 against Atlanta and lost that series, right? I mean, and again, Harden wasn't there, but certainly Embiid was there. And Ben Simmons was there, who's now on vacation.
The last time we saw
him.
Been
on vacation for the last time. Yeah, been on vacation now for a year. Yeah. I mean, so you kind of look at it and say there's something wrong there. It hasn't necessarily worked with Harden. I thought it would. It looked good at the beginning, and then it's gotten worse. And
he's not in good shape.
No, and neither is Embiid. I mean, Embiid's a big guy. I think he's worked harder than in the past. But as the playoffs continue on, those two guys are going to be less than they were earlier in the series because they're just not in great shape. You're right. Now you're going to see Giannis and Jason Tatum in the next round, and you got two guys that look like they could run all day. They're thoroughbreds, right? They're in great shape, and they're committed to their craft. So, I'm sure, again, in Philadelphia, which is more negative than Boston and New York. I mean, this is going to be the topic on sports talk radio on both sports stations in Philadelphia about how the 76ers are going to blow this thing. And then at that point, Doc's going to be gone. Maybe he'll be coaching the Lakers next year. And, who maybe Jay Wright decides to coach in the NBA after leaving Villanova. Who the hell knows? But there's a lot of pressure on Philadelphia to get through this. And then I think, if they somehow get through this series, then they play Miami. We'll see how healthy Miami is. But this thing's opening up for the Celtics in the East because they're the healthiest of the teams now that Rob Williams is back. They're going to have plenty of rest to go into the next series. They're going to have home court advantage in the next series. And then, they would play, in theory, a Miami team that even if Butler and Kyle Lowry are back, there's some question there. Those are two older guys. Things are opening up for the Celtics for sure.
Yeah, we don't know what the status for Chris Middleton's going to be like for Milwaukee. Should they advance to the next round? He could be available. He could not be available. It seems unclear at this point. But yeah, Celtics went into the postseason missing a key piece, and now they're through the first round and they're getting that piece back. So yeah, the health is right. We talked about this. We've been doing the show for 2 years. We've talked about this virtually, at some point, almost every episode. Health is paramount in the postseason, and you need to catch breaks. There's no team that's won a title that hasn't caught some sort of break by them being healthy and the team that they played being unhealthy. That's just how it goes.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's breaking well for the Celtics right now. Could it all derail in a game? Absolutely, it could. But let's look at another team that's not healthy, Sap, as we go out west into what's become a fascinating series between 1 and 8. Phoenix and New Orleans are tied at 2-2. Devin Booker has not been playing, is out. Probably for the rest of the series. Maybe might be able to come back if it's in a game 7. He's not going to play in game 5. They already announced that. It's shocking that it's 2-2. I thought even without Devin Booker, Phoenix would be able to take care of the Pelicans. What I didn't account for was that this Pelicans team is better than I thought they were, Sap. They're well coached. Willie Green's done an excellent job. Brandon Ingram's coming into his own. And they have a bunch of pests on this team. Herb Jones, Alvarado, they're not afraid of the moment.
No, they got off to a horrible start this year. Weren't they 1-13 at one point? And you
Yeah,
knew Zion
1-13.
probably wasn't coming back. They could have just packed it in. And Brandon Ingram, I've always been impressed with him. Kevin Durant said when he was drafted, I think I'm looking in the mirror when I see Brandon Ingram, 6'10", excellent handle, versatile offensive player. He's not Kevin Durant, but he's a borderline all-star. I believe he made the all-star team once. And then you got CJ McCollum, who's a pro, and now you've got an asset in Zion that when you get to the offseason, maybe you move him for something. Who knows? Or maybe he comes back and now you've got a powerhouse. Yeah, and you look at Phoenix, Chris Paul in game 3 was incredible. 28 points, 14 assists, 0 turnovers. That's just incredible. But then in game 4, he looked like a 38-year-old point guard. That's going to happen with older players. You're spectacular one game, the next game you just don't have it. So this is risky. I still think Phoenix will find a way to win this thing, but it shows the true value of Devin Booker, who I think will finish 5th or 6th in MVP voting. I think he and Jason Tatum will, finish 5th or 6th after the big 4. They got to get him back, and hamstrings are always very, very iffy, especially a player who relies so much on, quickness and suddenness like the great Devin Booker. But this was a lot more than Phoenix expected to go at least 6 games, maybe 7.
Yeah, Phoenix finished 28 games ahead of New Orleans in terms of win-loss record. New Orleans was, had to play, like you said, started 1-13, had to play in the play-in, win 2 games. They were down in the second half of the second game, and look at them now, 2-2 against the number 1 seed in the NBA. Yep. Memphis and Minnesota has been a very back and forth series, 2-2. Fascinating series with 2 of the best collection of young talent, I would say, in the NBA. These 2 teams also do not seem to like each other at all, which I enjoy very much. You would think Memphis should still be able to come out in this one, but Minnesota, when they play well, play really well, and when they play poorly, play really poorly.
It's all Karl Anthony Towns, right? When he's on, they're very difficult to beat. When he's off, you can beat him. And his ceiling and his floor are so far apart. There's times where he looks like the best big man in the sport. He looks like a Hall of Fame caliber big man. And there's other games where he looks like he's not really interested. The interesting matchup on these teams, and not necessarily that they're guarding each other, Anthony Edwards and Ja Morant, they may be the 2 best athletes in the league at this point. I don't think that's that far-fetched to say that. So, they're just going all out. I mean, there's like watching a video game with these 2 guys. And then you got other players involved, and D'Angelo Russell's still really good. And Memphis drafts so well. And Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks are really good players. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is a, all NBA caliber defender. So this has been the most fascinating series because, there's big leads that are blown, team comes back. And it's just a wild series that I think is going to go 7. I think somehow Memphis will find a way to win, but the winner of this will play most likely Golden State, which can wrap their series up in game 5 with all that veteran leadership. Golden State would be sitting in a really good spot, getting enough rest for their veterans to be ready for a very talented, pesky team that probably isn't quite ready to beat a team like Golden State.
Yeah, I think it's been a blast of a series so far, and I hope it goes to 7 because it's been fun to watch from Minnesota and Memphis. But Golden State, similar to Boston in the East, things have broken well for them. They've gotten healthy at the right time. They're moving the ball well. They look like they're having a great time out there. Denver is just outmatched, outgunned. The presumptive MVP Nikola Jokic did buy them a win in game 4. That's what people were asking of him. You should, if you're the MVP, you should buy your team at least 1 win. He did. They're saying all the right things. Well, it's never been done before, but why not us? But they're not going to win this series. Golden State, I fully expect to wrap it up tomorrow. They're playing their best basketball right now, and they look scary. They really do, Sap. And they're not even playing, their full complement of guys that they've had. Like Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman are non-factors in this series. I don't know if they plan on playing them in the postseason, but this is a good, deep team.
Yeah, those are 3 guys that are part of their future. You still got Steph and Clay starting to look more like Clay. Draymond does everything that's necessary to win, and Jordan Poole has been a revelation. So, and Andrew Wiggins made the All-Star team this year. Did he deserve it? Probably not, but he's still playing at a pretty high level. No, they're as well a run franchise as there is, and they've got in my opinion, the best leader in the sport in Steph Curry. I mean, here's a guy who's an all-time great who's willing to come off the bench to not disrupt the backcourt that's been really good. Awesome. And Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson, that's what he does. That's why, I think he's the best leader in the sport. I'm obviously going to put LeBron in there because of, how long he's been in the league. But that guy is he's easy to root for, Steph, because that's what a leader does. And to come off the bench and be productive like he is, he doesn't care what his role is. He just knows that at the end of the game, he's going to make big shots.
Yeah, especially at this point, he's in legacy mode right now. So it's about winning. Mm-hmm. He's got all the individual accomplishments you could ever want. Heck, he won the All-Star Game MVP this year. So, right. he's in like winning titles mode. And, Golden State looks absolutely primed right now. We'll see if they as they move on and play, like you said, it'll be a peskier team, whether it's Minnesota or Memphis. I think they'll struggle. Golden State will struggle a little bit more than they have against Denver, but still, Golden State has so much experience, and whoever they play is going to have virtually no playoff experience other than this round. So I think that, it's breaking quite nicely for the Warriors. And then the final series, Sap, is Dallas and Utah, which has been another weird series because Luka didn't play for the first 3 games. Then he comes back in game 4 and they lose. Then he's fabulous in game 5. It seemed like maybe he needed a game to come find his legs again.
I think Luka needs about 2 months to find his legs. Yeah. He's always looks out of shape.
He was great last night.
Guy in the league. Oh, he's phenomenal. He's. I told you when LeBron leaves, he's probably going to be my favorite player. He's phenomenal. I love watching him play. It's like he's playing at a different speed than everybody. He's got some Larry Bird in him, some Magic Johnson, some LeBron. I mean, he's incredible. But it just always looks like he's out of shape. Like he and Jokic look like 2 guys at the Y that, are really highly skilled guys, but, they couldn't have possibly played at a high level because they're just not really athletic or they don't look athletic. No, he's special. And I'm rooting for him to win this series because he lost 2 tough series the last 2 years against the Clippers, where he was kind of going up against, Paul George, Kawhi, and a better team. Be nice to see him into the next round. And look, a Phoenix Dallas series, that'd be interesting. And the Jazz are just, yeah, exactly. I mean, their 2 best players don't even like each other. And Quinn Snyder looks kind of creepy over there. He kind of looks like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho.
Yeah,
like
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and now you get Danny Ainge involved, and it's a weird franchise. And yeah, let's move on. Let's get Dallas in there. Dallas Phoenix would be a fascinating series, and then Golden State against one of the young teams would be a great series. And then we already know what is probably going to happen in the East with, say, Miami, Philly, if Philly somehow holds on from a 3-0 lead, and then the Celtics, Milwaukee. So the conference semis are going to be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas right now you're crossing their fingers that the Pelicans can find a way to win that series. And that if the Pelicans are able to knock out the Suns, how well does it break for the Warriors? I mean, they could cruise through the West. I think, but yeah, Luka, the Mavericks are. It's just a completely different team when they have him. Credit to Jalen Brunson, who has played phenomenal and has earned himself a boatload of money this offseason. But yeah, Doncic is just, he's spectacular talent, and he might be in a league that's full of confident players. I mean, everybody, when you get to the NBA, you're confident. He might be the most confident player.
Oh, without question.
He plays with an insane amount of confidence, which is, great. That's what you want out of your best player.
Yeah, he's like winking as he's hitting shots, and I just expect him to have a cigarette in his mouth at some point. Like he's just out there. He's an artist. I mean, his basketball IQ is through the roof. His skill level is through the roof. And I do think there will be one year in the offseason where he goes, you know what, I'm going to really work hard to get in shape, and that's when you're going to see really an explosion and an MVP. And a year you go, holy crap, how good is this guy? Because he's not even as good a shooter as he's going to be at some point. Think about that. If he becomes,
and he's gotten better.
Much more efficient shooter, he's gotten better. But picture him as a 38, 39, maybe 40% 3-point shooter. Holy crap, he'd be unstoppable. He is pretty much unstoppable now.
I'll say this, Seth, similar to LeBron, especially earlier in LeBron's career, when he wasn't really a great 3-point shooter, but at the end of games and in big moments, you're fully expected to go in. And that's what it is with Luka. Like, okay, the percentages say he's a 30% free 3-point shooter, but this is the end of the game. He's going to shoot a 3. It's going to go in. He's done it to the Celtics twice in 2 games. I've seen it. Yeah. He does it to all these teams. He hit in the game 4 that the Jazz ended up winning. Luka hit a huge three in that game down the
Yep.
stretch too, and you thought that was going to
Exactly.
be the dagger, but the Mavericks were able to blow that. But yeah, I think Dallas ends up winning this series because I don't know how engaged Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are at this point. They seem ready to move on from each other in the franchise, and so I think Dallas feels like, okay, we're hungry. This is our time. So I think Dallas has a good chance to wrap this one up. Whether it's in 6 or 7, I feel pretty
Mhm.
good about Dallas winning.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Sap. Well, that's going to do it for us. Just taking sort of a look around the NBA. Tomorrow, we're going to look more in depth at the Nets and what they do from here. I am going to be very thrilled to give a postmortem on them. That's going to make me very happy. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But thanks to everybody for watching. And you can check out the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Wherever podcasts are found, you can find it on YouTube at youtube.com/JetStryer. Make sure you check out our social medias, our Twitters, I should say, that are now presented by Elon Musk, at JohnSap25, at JetStryer, and make sure you check out FullPressCoverage.com for all sorts of great stuff, especially with the NFL draft coming up on Thursday. Tons of great stuff on Full Press Coverage, so check that out, and we will talk to you tomorrow. See you, everybody.